Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast. I'm Mark Fierro with Tyler Morgan, publisher of Vegas Legal Magazine, Jeff Haney, FCI Executive Vice President. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you use cannabis, marijuana, in any form, and if by any chance you happen to drive a car a few days later in Nevada, we have a word of caution. You can be imprisoned. You can have your children taken away, your financial future destroyed. And if you don't believe me, listen to the story of what happened to one respected veteran, Jeff Kranak, when a reckless driver ran a red light and hit his car. A Clark County public defender represented Jeff Kranak in district court, where Kranak faced a potential sentence of 16 years. Jeff Kranak, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me back, Mark.
It's been a long, long road these last few years.
It's been interesting, that's for sure.
Start, if you would, with a thumbnail of your service to your country before any of this started.
Well, I joined the military in '99, bounced around, went with the SEAL teams, and did some very interesting deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that is before. What put me there was Kosovo in '99, 2000. That was my first war experience and being shot at. But in a nutshell, I deployed to multiple combat theaters and made it to my almost 15-year mark. It was just shy of 15 years in the service before I was medically discharged.
So what happens? You find yourself at home, you're away from combat, you don't have to worry about being killed. What happens to you in your personal life?
A lot of stuff happens. The VA gets a hold of you at that point and adds on pills upon pills. My biggest problem back then was drinking. I would pound a fifth of vodka down straight out of the freezer like it was nothing when I came home, and that was just a starter.
And this is all driven by
PTSD, depression, not being able to adapt to state life when you're so used to being in the combat zone. So everything reminds you of a combat zone. Still to this day, a piece of trash on the road will throw PTSD to the roof, because I don't know if that's an ID or not.
One last question from me, then we're going to go to Tyler. So as a result of that, you're using the drugs that the VA gave you. How did that work for you?
Well, I call them my zombie meds. You didn't aspire to do anything. You didn't want to leave your house. I wasn't working at that time. I didn't want to leave my house. I just took mouthfuls of pills every day and isolated myself. I didn't live life. I hid.
And when you were trying to come off of those pills and you started experimenting with cannabis, how did that change everything for you?
I remember the day directly. I was coming off of the opiates they prescribed to me, and I got really, really dope sick, I call it, because, you know, it's not these little drugs, it's Percocet, Vicodin, these crazy concoctions that you take every day. I got really sick, so I went and got my medical marijuana card that day. I was tired of laying in bed being sick, and the doctor prescribed this marijuana strain that would help curb this. And it saved me. It changed my life. And I used it as medicine. I got the prescription. Basically, that's as I thought of it. He gave me the strains to take to help the anxiety, help the depression, help the sickness. So I legitimately used it as medicine. I'm not a stoner.
So tell us what happened to your sleep once you started using medical marijuana versus the VA drug.
I was getting full nights of sleep when I was on medical marijuana. Full nights. And I'm talking 9 hours of sleep, straight sleep. Before that, it was 3 hours, 4 hours, waking up from nightmares. Got on medical marijuana and started promoting my sleep. I was out in the community. I was teaching t-ball. I was teaching soccer. I was a hockey coach. You know, I wasn't smoking marijuana around the kids. I used it only at night to help promote sleep, and then carried out my day.
What was your relationship with your kids like at this point?
It was Great. We loved going out. We play dates all the time. We went everywhere. That day this accident happened, my son's a dinosaur buff, so I took him out to the fossil farm out in the desert out there.
Jeff, let me ask you about what you heard from your fellow military veterans, your friends who may have had similar experience as you, both as far as PTSD and as far as drugs that the VA may have put them on, and also the use of cannabis as a possible solution. Did you have anything to learn from the experience of others who you were close to?
Yeah, a couple of warriors, there's the ones that told me, you know, medical marijuana really helps. It really helps them and urged me to get off drinking all the alcohol. They said you can change with marijuana. It changes your life, and you can diminish the amount of pills you take from the VA every day.
Were they also feeling that that zombie type of feeling that you mentioned?
You can talk to 10 vets, and I bet you all 10 of them will tell you that the VA is just poisoning us with zombie pills.
You brought the pills with you. Let's take a look at the pills.
Well, keep in mind, too, before this accident, I was using medical marijuana, and I was down to 2 pills a day. When I got in an accident, I couldn't use marijuana at all. And this is the result. Take this one once a day. Take this one 4 times a day. Take this one once a day. Take this one once a day. And here's another good one. They step it up. Take a half, take a quarter, take this. So now you got to read on how to take that one. Here's another one. Oh, more bedtime nightmare medicine. Oh, another nightmare medicine. That's to sleep with that one. Here's twice a day for anxiety, or more if I need it. And here's ibuprofen for pain. And there's another pill to sleep. And that's what happened in my life after that accident, is this, by the VA.
And what happens if you forget to take one? Which
Well,
I'm
then-
sure is common.
Yeah, then you're wondering what's wrong with you. Did I forget to take the pill? And then you're trying to remember if you took it. But yeah, you have a bad day.
And then trying to remember which one you might have forgotten to take.
Exactly.
So then you risk
Exactly.
taking more of another one.
So then you're overloading your medicine.
Wow.
Let's go to April 28th of 2017. It's the night before your accident, and you smoke cannabis. You wait till after the kids are asleep, and you said you used to go to your garage or something like that, and that's how you'd smoke.
We'd go on our rooftop deck, because we got our rooftop deck, and we'd go and smoke not a full marijuana cigarette, probably a half, and go to bed.
And so this is back when nobody's messing with your life, and you're down to 2 pills. You're sleeping well. Everything is great.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us what happens the next day. Tell us about your day. What happens at that point?
Well, the next day I woke up 7:30 in the morning and drove my son out to the dinosaur fossil farm that's out by Shady or Sandy Ridge. I believe that's the place. And we spent the day out there, and we were heading back to go to his t-ball game that I was a coach of, but we were stopping at McDonald's for the play area, because you give your kids what they want. He wanted to stop at McDonald's, so we never made it to McDonald's, and we didn't make it to the t-ball game that day. We were in a car accident.
So you're on Boulder Highway. You're headed south, and you come to the overpass there right before you get to Boulder Station, and you've got a green light, right? It's
Yes.
green. Nobody contests this. You've got a green light, and you go forward. Tell us what happens at that moment.
At that moment, I realized we took contact, and a little part of my combat training is taking combat. When you take contact, you cover your sector. You see what you see from your window, and when I looked up right after that wreck, I'm looking at a green light going the other way. And I was like, I know that. And I said, why the hell did he run a red light?
To be clear, this was on the side that your son was on. This very easily could have killed your son.
Yeah, if speeds were different, very well could have, because he was sitting in that seat.
So ultimately, there would be a very thorough investigation of this accident. Is that correct? And what did that reveal, if so?
As in what?
Who was at fault?
According to the state, I was at fault. According to my investigation and my witnesses, he was at fault.
Now, to be clear, one of your witnesses is just not just any old witness. It's John Redline, a former investigator for fatal and major accidents for Metropolitan Police Department forever. Anybody that knows about accidents. And he said that you were not the cause, that marijuana was not the cause. You nor marijuana were the cause of that accident, that it was the other guy who ran the red light.
Yes.
But how did the marijuana come up? How did the whole concept of whether you were under the influence of cannabis come up after the accident?
I was asked a question on the scene, and when they asked, have you been drinking or on any illegal drugs, I said no, but I am a medical marijuana patient. And according to the search warrant for my blood, probable cause was me in tears because someone was losing their life because of an accident.
So they take you to Sunrise Hospital. You voluntarily did a blood draw, is that correct?
Voluntarily, yes, I did. And then they got a search warrant on top of that.
So at every turn, you're trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
You voluntarily do this. You admit to it. Without your admission, the highway patrolman never would have had any cause to take it any further without your admission at the scene. But the highway patrolman does do something. He watches you the entire time. And to his credit, in preliminary hearing, he said he saw no signs of impairment, right? He said he watched you the whole time.
Well, that's the funny part about my prelim. That officer was not at the prelim. The first officer on scene was with me, but the one that stayed with me at the hospital and addressed the sobriety tests, the initial 3 tests to determine if I was impaired or not, was not at my prelim.
So the guy who's prepared to say that you're not under the influence is not at your prelim. They conveniently sidestepped that.
Yeah.
All right, so the bottom line is what they detect is not the active THC that makes people high. What they detect in your blood is the metabolite. It's almost like the ash of a joint. And it's not active at all, but it's like a marker that remains in the blood. So anybody who thinks that marijuana is legal in the state of Nevada, they're right, as long as they don't drive a car. If you drive a car at any point for days afterwards, you're guilty. If somebody hits you, right? I mean, that's your takeaway from this, correct?
Yeah, you're not safe. If you're a medical marijuana patient, you're not safe. If it helps you, you're still not safe if you're driving, because the state will come after you if you're involved in an accident. I'm proof.
Did you do any field sobriety tests at the scene?
Yes, I did. I did 3.
3 of them and passed all of them.
Passed every single one of them.
So really, it was just the fact that you admitted that you had a medical marijuana card, and that there was an accident, that they took that as probable cause to take you in and take your blood.
Yes.
And
That
the
could happen to
accident,
anybody.
I was just going to say, the accident was how many hours after the last use of cannabis the night before?
I calculated it with my sleep number bed, and it was exactly 17 hours and like 34 minutes.
So the offer is basically, if we get you in court and we convict you, what were you looking at? What is the prosecution puts up because somebody else caused an accident?
What I initially was looking at, I was looking at 16 to 20 years on each count, which I was told during negotiations they were going to go for about 16 of those.
And part of that is they're going to take away your kid because you endangered his life because somebody else hit your car.
Yes.
All right, so that's where Jeff and I, and we get Tyler involved, and this is where our paths cross, and we basically said, this is not right. We wanted to bring you and talk to you and everything. And as it turns out, the judge had seen the magazine where we brought up your case. She admits it before the case begins. So tell us, because after all of this threat, the possibility of losing everything, tell us what the judge settled on, which, compared to what you were facing, what is it that she sentences you to?
Well, I ended up taking a plea from the most heavily charged charges that I had, and they were dropping them charges down a bit, and they removed the child neglect charge. So I started negotiating again for a plea deal, but I was not going to take a plea deal unless I had it under Alford Clause. So I ended up taking a possible 2 to 6 charge going in under the Alford Clause.
So the day that we go into court, I'm sitting there with your wife, what did you walk out of court with?
I walked out with 5 years of probation. Suspended sentence, basically. I think she was going to charge me 14 to 48. She was going to charge me, but she dropped it down to probation because she wanted to keep an eye on me, because all the time I did serve prior to that, I would have went to prison and turned around and came right back out. So she wanted to keep an eye on me.
And during all this, while this is going on, what kind of financial impact did this have on your family, and also your relationship with your wife and your kid? Because I know you were held up in a prison in the jail cell. They'd put you back on your medication. Why don't you describe sort of the hardship of just getting through this whole process?
Me and my wife moved apart. We moved apart for 6 months. We were going to get a divorce. I wasn't me again. I was the other guy, so to speak. Yeah, we almost got divorced. Constant job changes, and now when you do a background check, they come up and see you're a felon. No one wants you. So the job, I've worked the whole time. I've quit 3 jobs in between, but I've been at this job now for almost 2 years with my current job, so I'm doing better now, but yeah.
You know, Jeff and I have covered veterans cases involving exactly the same cocktail of pills, and they say the exact same thing. They start using cannabis and all this stuff goes away. Everybody in their group, they say, is suicidal, was suicidal. Everybody in their group is tremendously overweight because they lose motivation to do anything. There was one guy, I remember dude must have been 6'7", something like that. And I go, man, you look like you're 20 years old. He's an older guy from 45. I go, you're the picture of health. He goes, I weighed close to 400 pounds. And then I started using cannabis and started riding bicycles like crazy with all these other veterans guys. So the bottom line is this your life again now?
Yeah. This is what I go through every day.
Yeah, to recap, the cannabis use had allowed you to kick almost all of these pills, virtually all of them, this entire drug cocktail. But you could no longer use cannabis. Why? Is that under the terms of your probation? Or?
Yes. The judge put that written into my probation contract. You can use medical marijuana on probation in the state of Nevada, but I wasn't allowed to because the judge put that stipulation in.
And how long was that for?
Probation was 5 years. I just got off early for good conduct and working the whole time while I was on probation, so I got off early.
So to be clear, you could use cannabis now.
I could, yes.
But what do you think would happen?
I think there's a target on my back. I don't think I'm safe in this state. So I gotta weigh both evils.
Well, I mean, this all happened. He used it 17 hours prior to the accident. I mean, if you were in his shoes, I'd be terrified if I had to use it and drive anywhere the next day. Run an errand of the grocery for the family. Something might happen and get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
This is such an important life lesson for everybody out there, but particularly for veterans. I hate to pry into the private part of your life, but here we are. Before, when you were using these drugs, one of the issues that you had was some pretty vivid suicidal ideation. Is that correct?
That is very correct. I wound up into the loony bin for 8 days, very medicated in there. Yeah, I couldn't shut off killing myself that day, so I called the suicide hotline and wound up in the psychiatric ward for 8 days.
Has that ever come up during the days that you were only using cannabis? Had you ever had those thoughts?
No. It promoted a healthier lifestyle for me. It promoted me to wake up feeling relaxed and refreshed and not drinking 3 Monsters just to get through the day, which I'm at now, again, drinking Monsters and Rock Stars nonstop to stay awake because this one will leave me groggy for the first 3 hours in the morning. Their solution is to take the pills earlier at night, so now their solution is to take this one on my drive home to help me sleep.
Seems like, particularly in the case of veterans, that there'd be some way that somebody would see the wisdom of not taking a chance on throwing away people's lives like this when if for nothing else, for post-traumatic stress disorder, that there's a real value to help save people's lives, you know, that, now this last session of the legislature, everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew about your case. Your case was used as something of a threshold case because it was so clear-cut and because law enforcement at the scene said that you were not physically impaired. They admitted that, and to that one to the one highway patrolman's credit, he watched you very closely because he wanted to be able to say that you were not impaired. As you say, he didn't testify. He wasn't given the opportunity to testify. But the truth is he was watching you to kind of protect you from anybody saying that you were impaired or stumbling all over the place like a blithering idiot.
Yeah.
So what was done at the legislature? There were a lot of people before we went in to the legislature saying, we're going to change this law and we're going to do this, and we're lobbying groups to get a lot of money behind this. Did they ever lift a finger on any of this stuff?
No, they all disappeared. There's been some groups that have still been in my corner to this day. Tamara Netzal, and I gave you her number, she runs a program called Guilty Consequences, and it's all about marijuana cases, about people getting their lives uproared because of marijuana.
And tell everybody what's behind her. This is just somebody that is pissed off, right?
Yeah,
she's
an advocate, and she does a lot of work for people that get caught in situations like mine. She has books out. She goes to the legislation. She's a fighter. She fights for people like me stuck in a corner. She is a great person, and we've been in contact the whole time.
I don't want to get partisan here, but I do want to bring up what happened to the law. How many Democrats voted against changing the law that would have been in your favor?
I don't even know if I didn't look at that part because I was so mad about this law. You can't take marijuana on a DUI charge and say, well, because he wasn't in a wreck, his DUI sticks, but this person that just got pulled over for it, that DUI is expunged and it's off the record. That's their fix-all in Congress here? In the legislation, that's their fix-all for marijuana cases.
It was Nevada Republicans that stopped that law from being changed, and whether it was because there was some concern that people would drive around crazy on marijuana and jump out of buildings and stuff, I don't know, but it would have passed but for their resistance.
Yes, probably. It's that stupid commercial in the 80s with your brain on drugs mentality that's still stuck in Republicans' heads. I mean, Some of them are starting to come around, but it's still, you know, marijuana is this voodoo evil stoner drug.
And I will say there are some Republicans that very much in the legislature that back your position, but I think there's a real fear that voters won't see the issue, even when it comes to a veteran who served his country, who you know, how many times did you almost get yourself blown up in between the years of service that you had over there? And yet, well, I don't believe that we're one bit closer. We're closer in your case after putting you through hell and continuing to have to deal with this instead of something that has been shown to be effective and to help you with some really significant health problems that were you not as strong as you are, it might have ended all here, and we'd be talking about good old Jeff Kranak used to be.
Well, I'm about to add some more pills too to my repertoire because they found something in an X-ray, so I got to have some heart procedures done here in the next week. So I'm sure they're going to add some more medicine to my thing.
For anyone that's out there listening, and they want to sort of create change on this issue, do you have any recommendations of where they can go, who they could look up, who they could speak to?
You can look at the state of California. You can look at the state of Colorado, where they put thresholds that make sense there. They know them limits at 2 and 5 here are just preposterous. In some states, the metabolite doesn't even come into play. In California, it's 5 nanograms, which I would have been perfectly fine in California. I would have been perfectly fine in Colorado. I would have been perfectly fine in Michigan, but this state didn't move forward from the initial threshold they put at 2 and 5.
You know, I worked with one of the attorneys to the stars, Mike Flanagan, in California. I worked with him on the Michael Jackson death case. And so he's one of those people that catches very high profile, highly complex usage and impaired drivers cases. And when California passed their law legalizing recreational use, I called him. I go, Mike, you must be really working your butt off down there now that they've passed this. And he goes, what are you talking about? I go, well, with impaired drivers with marijuana. He goes, they don't ticket impaired drivers. They don't get in wrecks. They drive too slow. That's not what happens. They're not alcohol wrecks where you see cars torn in half. If you had the Nevada legislature here, and you had a couple of minutes to just tell them what's in their hands when it comes to the lives of Nevadans, specifically lives of veterans who depend on cannabis, as you say, to help keep their lives together, to keep them alive. We lose hundreds of veterans every single day to suicide. To this day we do.
Yeah.
More than we ever lost during the war. What would you say to the Nevada legislature about changing this law?
I would tell them to look at the states that adopted marijuana. They adopted medical marijuana here in 2016, I believe. I can't remember the exact date, but medical came and then recreation came. And I remember recreation hitting when I was sitting in jail. So I think that came around right after 2017, the recreation popped in, because I was in jail when that popped in. They need to look at the law they put in over 20 years ago. You can't take the lowest amount testable and say that person's impaired by any means, because a person that smoked 5 days ago is still going to be over that threshold. Even though he didn't touch it for 5 days, he's still a DUI in your state. So it's like a double-edged sword here in this state.
I'm going to say that we have not heard the last of this case. Jeff, thanks so much for coming in and sharing your story and telling us some of the personal parts. I'm sure you have no desire to, but I think it's going to help in the long run. I think it's going to help a lot of people in the long run. I certainly hope that it does. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fiero Communications Vice President Jeff Haney, want to thank you as well, and Tyler Morgan, publisher of Vegas Legal Magazine. Remember to like and share the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast on Facebook. You can also catch us on YouTube, iTunes, or Stitcher. And for all of you out there with a story idea, or an axe to grind, get a hold of Vegas Legal, the leading magazine in the Southern Nevada legal market. You can call Tyler at
702-222-3476.
Reach out. Tell us. Tell your friends. Have a good one. We're out of here.